By the time they put him in the ground, only 2 people stood by the grave, and one of them was already planning to dig him back up. The wind blew dry dirt across the chapel hill, whispering through the sagebrush like it had secrets to spill. Evelyn Harper stood stiff in black, her gloved hands clutching a worn Bible that hadn't been opened in years. Her face didn't crack. Not when the gravedigger nodded, not when the pine box slid down on creaking ropes. Her husband, Thomas, had always said he wanted to be buried facing the mountains. Today, he was lowered face down in a valley of dust. The second figure at the grave barely spoke. Levi Boone, tall, broad-shouldered, and carved from Wyoming sun and regret. He tipped his hat as the coffin settled. The only sound was the rope's release and the thud of wood meeting the earth. Evelyn didn't cry. Levi didn't blink. The air smelled of sage and wet soil, still clinging from last night's storm. When the gravedigger hesitated, Levi stepped forward. "I'll help." He took the spade, filled it, and dropped the first clump of dirt with a sharp finality. Evelyn didn't watch the grave. She watched Levi's eyes and saw how they lingered too long on the closed coffin, like it held a question only he remembered. The young deputy leaned against the chapel's rotted rail, squinting at them. "No preacher? No folks from town?" His voice was careless, too casual for death. A man dies in a storm. You'd think he'd get more than a shovel and silence. Evelyn's voice was cold and low. "He didn't ask for company." The deputy snorted and wandered off. Levi didn't say anything, just kept filling in the grave. When it was done, Evelyn placed a flat stone at the head. No name carved into, just a single line etched with her own knife. Thomas H. Back at the Harper Ranch, dusk settled in slow. The fence gate creaked like a warning, and the cows were restless, stomping, lowing at something in the wind. Evelyn rubbed her temples, exhaustion clawing at the edge of her bones. When she reached the barn, she found the east fence wire slashed clean through. No signs of coyotes, no tracks, just cut. Inside the house, she made coffee without thinking. Muscle memory, 2 mugs. She paused before pouring the second one and set it down. A storm lantern burned in the window, casting a yellow glow against the cold wood walls. Night came sharp. The moon was high and the air dry. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow, steady, approaching from the north trail. Her rifle was behind the door, but she didn't move. She pressed her hand to the window pane and waited. A rider passed. One man. Horse dark, saddle weather worn. She recognized the shape. Broad shoulders, wide brim hat, old canvas duster. Levi Boone. But he wasn't. Headed toward town, he was headed back to the cemetery. Evelyn didn't sleep. She stared at the cold mug on the table. Something twisted in her chest. Something she hadn't let herself feel at the grave. Not sorrow. Not grief. Suspicion. The next morning, the first rooster hadn't even crowed when she saddled her mare and rode out. Up at the chapel hill, the grave looked wrong, too neat, too fresh. And just beyond the cottonwood tree, she spotted a patch of disturbed soil and a shovel stabbed upright, in the earth like a warning. Levi Boone was gone, and her husband's coffin, so was it. The sun cracked over the ridgeline like a gunshot, golden light spilling across the prairie. Levi Boone rode hard, his horse lathered and snorting, the cold wind biting through his coat. Behind him, slung across the saddle like a sack of feed, was something heavy wrapped in canvas, a tarp stiff with dirt, blood, and secrets. He didn't stop until he reached the base of a lonely bluff, a place he hadn't visited in 10 years. The old shack was half collapsed, eaten by rot and time. Here, the truth had started. Here, he'd finally end it. He dismounted slow, unwrapped the canvas and pulled out the journal, leather-bound, corner scorched, soaked through with the rot of the grave. Its pages still held somehow, ink blurred but legible. He'd read it already, every page a sin, every line a nail in the coffin that should have stayed buried. 10 years ago, Levi rode with a different name and a different badge. The Pinkertons had sent him to track a gang robbing rail contracts, Thomas Harper among them, smart, charming, dangerous. Thomas had fooled them all, right up until that shootout in Cold Knife Gulch. Blood everywhere. Bodies, too. Thomas had vanished in the smoke. They figured he died. Levi half hoped he had. But a year ago, Levi saw a familiar face pass him on the trail out of Blackwood. Bearded, leaner, softer eyes, calling himself Thomas Harper. A rancher, married, building fences and raising cattle with a woman who looked like she belonged in another life. Now he knew the truth. He hadn't changed. He'd just gone underground. The knock on Levi's door came fast and angry. Evelyn. She didn't wait for invitation, shoved her way in, boots tracking dust across his floor. "Why were you there?" she demanded, her voice a rasp. "Why did you dig him up?" Levi didn't flinch. He walked to the table, dropped the journal like a loaded gun between them. "Because your husband wasn't who you think he was." She stared at the stained cover. "Didn't touch it. He was mine. That's who he was. He buried more than cattle, Evelyn." She picked up the book, hesitated, then opened it. The words came in jagged lines, names, places, dates, a map tucked between pages, gold shipments rerouted, Pinkerton schedules leaked, payoffs listed in shorthand. In the margins, confessions, or maybe just justifications. Evelyn read in silence. Page after page. "He wrote about me," she whispered. "About our wedding. About building the barn." "Keep reading," Levi said. She did. He wrote about the money hidden under the floorboards of the old shack. About a marshal he framed. About a girl in Wichita who died because of his silence. His words weren't soft. They weren't guilty. They were careful. Cold. By the time she closed the book, Evelyn's face was paper white. "You knew him before?" "I rode with him. Trusted him. Nearly died because of him." She looked at him then. Really looked. "So why now?" "Why'd you come back?" Levi's jaw flexed. "Because I saw you at that grave burying a lie, and I couldn't let him fool you too." She sat down hard, like her knees finally gave up. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "You took his body." "Where?" Levi looked out the window, eyes narrowing toward the hills. "Someplace quiet. Someplace where the truth doesn't stay buried. I want to see him." "No," he said. "You want to remember the man you thought you married. But the one in that box? He'd sell you for a fast horse and a half-ounce of gold." She stood slowly, holding the journal tight against her chest. "You don't get to decide what I do with the truth." Levi stepped toward the door, gripping the frame like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Then come with me, but you better be ready to dig deeper than a grave." Outside, the wind had picked up. The world felt hollow, and behind Evelyn's silence was something new. Not grief. Rage. The trail narrowed as they rode into the ravine, high rock walls on both sides, the sun barely reaching the ground beneath the canopy of twisted juniper and cottonwood. Evelyn followed Levi in silence, her mare picking careful steps over the uneven path. The farther they went, the colder the air became, as if even the wind refused to speak here. At the end of the trail stood what remained of Levi's old camp, a burned-out shack with its chimney collapsed, charred boards blackened, with soot and time. It smelled of ash and memory, the place where everything had started, and now, maybe where it would end. Levi dismounted first, knelt beside an old foundation stone, and brushed aside layers of dried brush. Beneath it, the faint shape of a trapdoor. "He used this place?" Evelyn asked. "He built it, hid what he stole right here. They didn't open it yet. Not yet. Not with what was coming, because they weren't alone. 3 days ago, a new group had ridden into town. 4 men, weather-beaten, rough-eyed, the kind who didn't ask for whiskey, just took it. Bounty hunters. One of them had a hand-drawn sketch of Thomas Harper's face, a younger version, cleaner. The barkeep said they were sniffing around about a stash of gold gone missing 10 years back. Now they were watching Evelyn. She saw them in the general store mirror. On the trail behind her. Once, late at night, they followed her past the cottonwood ridge, until Levi stepped from the shadows with a rifle across his shoulder and told them to keep riding. They did, but not far. Now Evelyn sat by the fire as Levi boiled coffee in a dented tin pot. Her boots were dusty, her hands blistered from the ride, but her eyes had grown sharp. Quieter, too. She broke the silence. "Why didn't you kill him when you found him?" Levi didn't turn, just stirred the fire with a broken branch. "Because I saw a man who built fences, had a woman he kissed like he meant it, a man who whistled while fixing a wagon axle." He sighed. "I wanted to believe he'd changed." "And?" He looked at her finally. "Men like that don't die honest. They just run out of places to lie." Neither of them spoke for a while. Then they moved to the tree. The old cottonwood stood crooked, its bark peeled in long scars. Levi dropped to his knees, pulled a spade from the saddlebag, and began to dig. Evelyn joined him. The earth gave way. Faster than expected, dry and loose. A foot down, they hit metal. An old tin box rusted at the hinges, sealed in oilcloth. Inside was no gold, no coins or jewelry, just paper. Dozens of letters, ledgers, maps, some handwritten, others stamped with official seals. Evelyn opened one with shaking fingers. It was a letter from a U.S. Marshal addressed to Thomas, referencing an unspoken deal, blackmail, from the tone. Another note listed 5 names, men still in town, men in power. Levi sifted through it, face grim. He didn't just steal, he muttered. He brokered secrets. Evelyn sat back on her heels, staring at the pile. He didn't come here to change, she said. He came to hide. Tears slipped down her cheek, not for Thomas, but for the woman who had believed him, who had kissed that man goodnight thinking she knew his soul. Behind them, a hawk screamed from the cliffs. By nightfall. Evelyn had hidden the papers in a saddlebag and tucked it into the loft of her barn under old hay. Levi slept on the porch, shotgun beside him. They didn't speak of what came next until it arrived. 2 nights later, while the stars hung heavy and cold above the ranch, the bounty hunters struck. They came quiet, 3 on horseback, 1 on foot. Evelyn heard the horses first. She grabbed her rifle. Levi was already moving. They didn't come to ask questions. They came to take. Evelyn fired the first shot, through the air, not to hit. To warn. The lead bounty hunter shouted back. "We're not here for you, lady. Just want what that bastard left behind." Levi stepped into the moonlight, rifle cocked. "And what if it's already gone?" the man sneered. "Then we'll take what's left." A tense silence followed, dust swirling, fire crackling low inside the house. Then Evelyn's voice cut the dark. "They want Thomas," she said. "Let's give them what he feared most." She turned, strode into the house, and came back with the ledger. 1 page only. The page with the 5 names, including the bounty's employer. She threw it into the fire. Flames caught fast. The bounty men watched it burn, stunned. Levi smiled for the first time in days, not warm, but sharp. "Go tell whoever sent you. The only thing left of Thomas Harper is ashes. And the truth's not for sale." They left. Not all at once, but one by one. The next morning, Evelyn poured coffee for 2. Her hands were steady now. So was her voice. "We're not done, are we?" Levi shook his head. "No," he said. "But we just started digging." The cemetery was quiet at dusk, just like the day they first put him in the ground. Same crooked crosses, same wind rustling through brittle grass. But this time, Evelyn stood alone by the grave, with something heavier than grief in her hands. The journal, the ledger, and the last piece of a man who never truly belonged to her. The sun was bleeding out behind the hills, casting long shadows across the churchyard fence. She had sent no message, made no threats, just rode out, knowing they'd come. And they did. 4 of them, the bounty hunters, rode up like they owned the dirt, their boots cracking gravel as they dismounted. Their leader was tall, with a scar running from ear to jaw. He tipped his hat to her, but it didn't look polite. "You know why we're here," he said. "I do," Evelyn replied, voice like dry flint. "But what you want ain't worth the weight you're carrying." He nodded toward the bundle in her arms. Ledger, map, gold, handed over. Behind them, a fifth man shifted in the saddle. Younger, greedy eyes, hands too close to his holster. Evelyn didn't flinch. She looked at the grave, the fresh dirt, the old lie, and said, "There's no gold, just rot." Then she dropped the journal into the fire she'd already set in a rusted pail by the stone. Flames licked up fast, curling the pages into ash. The scar-faced man stepped forward, reaching for the ledger, but didn't get far, because Levi Boone was there. From behind the chapel, slow and steady, came the sound of boots. Levi, with his coat pulled tight and shotgun resting lazy in his hands, like he was ready to lean into death if it meant taking one more man with him. "You boys are late," he said, voice graveled and calm. The bounty hunters shifted. Hands moved to holsters. The young one twitched. Then someone drew. Gunfire cracked like lightning. Dust flew. Horses scattered. Levi took a shot to the shoulder, went down to one knee but didn't drop the gun. One of the bounty hunters rushed Evelyn. He got close, grabbed at the ledger. A gunshot split the air. His scream followed. Evelyn stood with her rifle smoking, eyes cold, breath steady. She'd shot him through the hand. The ledger fell to the dirt. "You want lies?" she growled. "Pick them up yourself." The others hesitated. One cursed and ran. Another helped his wounded friend. The scar-faced man backed away, hatred in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "I already did," she replied, "but not anymore." The last of them rode off into the purple dusk. Levi sat against the chapel wall, blood soaking his shirt. Evelyn dropped beside him, pulled a bandana from her pocket, pressed it to the wound. He winced, then gave her a crooked smile. "He stole a name," Levi muttered. "A life. And your heart." She nodded slowly, tying the cloth tight. "But I'm still standing, and he's just a ghost now." They sat there while the fire burned low. Weeks later, the barn stood straighter than it had in years. New boards, fresh nails. Evelyn hammered while Levi limped beside her, arms still stiff but healing. They didn't speak of Thomas anymore. A new cross stood at the far edge of the land, not in the graveyard, not by the house, just near the cottonwoods where the wind blew honest. The cross didn't say Thomas Harper, it said, "The Truth." And beneath it, wildflowers bloomed. Voiceover. Some men dig graves, others dig for justice. And some women learn to plant things that grow where nothing ever should have bloomed again.